My name is Asasha Rutledge, but everyone who has ever loved me enough to know the difference calls me Casey. I was 31 years old when a delivery truck ran a red light, crushed the driver's side of my car, and left me bleeding so badly that the trauma surgeon told my family I might not survive the night. 7 days later, my mother finally walked into my hospital room carrying white lilies, a silver balloon, and the expression she used whenever she wanted strangers to believe we were close. The bed was empty. The machines were gone. On the pillow was one folded note with her name written across the front. By then I knew about all 3 calls. I knew what she had said when the nurse begged her to come. "Your sister needs us more right now." I knew Madison had never come at all. I knew my father was 9,000 miles away, believing I had suffered a few bruises and a scare. And I knew the lie had not started with my accident. The accident had only torn open something that had been bleeding inside our family for years. If you had met us before that Tuesday, you would have thought we were ordinary. My father, David, was 62, an engineer who trusted measurements, warranties, and people who looked him in the eye. My mother, Lorraine, was the kind of woman who remembered everybody's anniversary and somehow forgot the things that mattered if they belonged to me. My older sister, Madison, had spent most of her life being treated like a weather event. If Madison was happy, the whole house was sunny. If Madison was upset, everyone took shelter. I was the dependable one. Dependable children are useful because nobody has to ask whether they will show up. They just do. I had been a nurse at St. Bridget Regional for 8 years. 12-hour shifts, rotating weekends, aching feet, stale coffee, and the strange privilege of meeting people on the worst day of their lives. I was good at it. Calm voice, steady hands, no panic where patients could see it. I could explain a frightening lab result to a terrified family without making the room feel smaller. I could sit with a dying stranger for 20 minutes because his daughter was stuck in traffic and he was afraid of being alone. That last part matters. Because while I was doing that for strangers, I had somehow trained my own family to believe I required nothing. Every Sunday evening, I stopped at my parents' house after work. I filled my mother's pill organizer, checked her refill dates, replaced the batteries in the blood pressure cuff, and wrote appointments on the calendar taped beside the refrigerator. Lorraine would thank me without looking up from whatever Madison had sent to the family group chat. That spring, the group chat had one subject: Madison's wedding. Not marriage, wedding. There is a difference. Marriage is 2 people building a life. Madison's wedding was a 10-week national emergency involving silk samples, seating charts, florist arguments, bridesmaid shoes, signature cocktails, and a French bulldog named Biscuit, who somehow became assistant director of operations. 2 weeks before my accident, Biscuit limped after jumping off a couch. Madison posted 6 photos, 2 videos, and a paragraph beginning with, "Please keep our baby in your prayers." My mother called me during medication pass to ask whether a torn dog ligament could become life-threatening. I told her no. She sighed like I was withholding hope. The same woman would later hear that her daughter might die before morning and ask to be kept posted. At the time, though, I did what I always did. I swallowed the irritation, finished my shift, picked up Lorraine's prescription, and stopped by her house on the way home. My father was in Singapore installing a packaging line for the company where he had worked for 37 years. He had been gone 3 weeks and had 2 more to go. Dad hated being away, but the contract came with a completion bonus that Lorraine had already assigned to several future expenses, including part of Madison's wedding. He called me whenever the time difference allowed. "How's my girl?" That was always his first question. He never meant Madison. The Sunday before the crash, he called while I was standing in his study looking for the spare key to their garage. Lorraine had misplaced hers, and naturally this had become my assignment. I opened the top desk drawer and found rubber bands, old receipts, a pocket knife, church blood drive pins, and 2 laminated donor cards. David Rutledge, O negative. Lorraine Rutledge, A positive. I remember seeing them because Dad was absurdly proud of being O negative. He called himself the emergency reserve every time the church blood drive came around. I shut the drawer and forgot about the cards. For 6 weeks. Then they became the reason I stopped asking what I had done wrong. The crash happened on a Tuesday night at 7:18. I had just finished a double shift. My hair was still twisted into a tired bun. My scrubs smelled faintly of antiseptic and cafeteria coffee. Lorraine's blood pressure medication was in the passenger seat because I had promised to drop it off before going home. Route 9 and Callahan has one of those intersections where everybody thinks their schedule is more important than the light. Mine turned green. I waited half a second, started forward, and saw a white delivery truck coming from my left, far too fast. There was no dramatic moment of understanding, no life flashing before my eyes. Just headlights, then metal. The truck hit my driver's side at nearly 40 miles an hour and pushed my car sideways into the guardrail. I remember the window exploding inward. I remember my shoulder snapping against the belt. I remember thinking, stupidly, that my mother's prescription had gone somewhere under the seat. Then I remember nothing. They brought me to St. Bridget, my hospital, my emergency department. People I had eaten birthday cake with cut my clothes off and tried to keep me alive. Later, Nora Fenney told me the trauma bay became quiet in that particular way it does, when everybody is frightened but nobody is allowed to behave frightened. Nora had been my closest friend for 9 years and was charge nurse that evening. She recognized my shoes before she recognized my face because there was so much blood. My spleen had ruptured. I was bleeding internally. My blood pressure kept falling. The surgeon decided within minutes that waiting was more dangerous than operating. At 8:43, Nora opened my emergency contact information. Lorraine Rutledge. Mother, Nora called. My mother answered on the fourth ring. There was music behind her. Soft instrumental music, glasses clinking, women laughing. Nora said, "Mrs. Rutledge, this is Nora Fenney at St. Bridget Regional. Casey has been in a serious motor vehicle accident. She is unconscious and is being taken for emergency surgery. You need to come now." There was a pause. Not the kind of pause where a mother stops breathing, the kind where someone checks a calendar. Then Lorraine said, "We can't leave right now. Her sister needs us more." Nora thought she had misheard her. "What?" "Madison is dealing with something important. Just keep me posted." Nora looked through the trauma bay glass at the team hanging another unit of blood. "Mrs. Rutledge, Casey may be critically injured." "I understand. Keep me posted." Then she hung up. At 9:12, the trauma surgeon called again before they took me into the operating room. He did not soften it. "Your daughter is bleeding internally. We are operating immediately. There is a significant risk she may not survive." Lorraine asked, "How long will surgery take?" He said he could not promise. She said, "Call me when you know more." He told her, "You should be here." My mother replied, "My other daughter needs me tonight." At 11:06, after they removed my spleen and repaired what they could, my pressure crashed again. Nora called a third time. This time she used the sentence nurses do not use casually. "If there is family who wants to see Casey, you need to come. Tonight may be her last." Nora told me later that she expected screaming. Or crying. Or the sound of car keys. Instead, Lorraine exhaled. Then she said, "Madison has been through enough today. Please don't make this harder than it already is." Nora went silent. My mother added, "Keep us posted." That was the third call. Madison received 2 calls and 1 text from the hospital. She answered none of them. At 11:48, she finally texted Nora, "Mom is handling it. Biscuit is at the emergency vet." Biscuit had torn the same ligament they had already scheduled for surgery the following week. While blood was being pushed into my veins through a rapid infuser, my sister was sitting beside a French bulldog with a bandaged leg. And my mother was with her. I woke up almost 2 days later in intensive care. Not all at once. First there was sound. A monitor. Air moving. Shoes squeaking beyond a curtain. Then pain. Then the ceiling. Then Nora's face. She looked exhausted enough that I understood something terrible had happened before I remembered that the terrible thing had happened to me. I tried to speak. Nothing useful came out. She leaned closer. "You're okay," she whispered. "You're here." I looked toward the door. That was my first mistake. There was nobody standing there. No father, because he was overseas. No mother. No sister. Just an empty doorway and a yellow isolation cart parked across the hall. I fell asleep again. When I woke the next morning, I began doing what nurses do when we are patients. I audited my own disaster. Splenectomy, 3 fractured ribs, fractured left wrist, concussion, 32 stitches across my abdomen, transfusions, a chart full of words I had written about other people and never expected to read about myself. I asked Nora for my phone. She looked away. The phone had been crushed in the wreck. So I asked the question that mattered. Did Mom come? Nora did not answer quickly enough. That was how I knew. Did Madison? Her mouth tightened. I stared at the ceiling. There are moments when your life changes loudly. A truck through an intersection, a surgeon opening your abdomen. And then there are moments when it changes because somebody cannot meet your eyes. I whispered, "Tell me." Nora pulled the visitor chair closer to my bed. And for the first time in 31 years, someone gave me my family exactly as it was, without editing the picture to protect me. She told me every call in order. She repeated my mother's words without decorating them, because Nora knew I would hear any mercy she added as another lie. When she finished, I asked where Lorraine and Madison had been. Nora hesitated. Then she handed me her phone. Madison's public Instagram answered before she could. The first story had been posted at 8:57 Tuesday night, 14 minutes after Nora's first call. Madison stood on a small platform inside a bridal boutique wearing her rehearsal dinner dress. Lorraine was behind her, smiling into the mirror while adjusting one shoulder strap. Champagne sat on a table beside them. The caption read, "Mom always saves the day." The next photograph was Biscuit at the emergency veterinary clinic after midnight, wrapped in a blue blanket while Madison kissed his head. Lorraine's hand was visible stroking his back. Our brave little man. I looked at those words until the screen blurred. I did not cry. I did not throw the phone. I handed it back and asked Nora for water. Then I said, "So they knew." Nora nodded. I drank slowly, because my ribs punished every swallow. "Okay," I said. And something inside me finally stopped asking them to choose me. For the rest of that afternoon, I kept expecting anger to arrive. It never did. What came instead was clarity, cold and clean, the way a room feels after somebody finally opens a window that has been painted shut for years. I thought about every birthday dinner where Madison chose the restaurant because she was pickier. Every Christmas morning when Lorraine photographed her opening presents while I was asked to hold the camera. Every emergency that became mine to solve unless I was the emergency. The pattern was not new. The hospital had simply made it impossible to excuse. By evening, Nora brought me another phone charger, a clean sweatshirt, and the expression of someone who had decided she was not leaving me alone with my thoughts. "You need to call your dad," she said. I stared at the dark television. "He thinks I'm fine." "That is exactly why you need to call him." My father had been in Singapore long enough that his American number was useless most days. He used a local company phone and called home through an app when the plant schedule allowed. Lorraine knew the hours. Lorraine knew the time difference. Lorraine was the person who carried family news across that distance. Which meant Lorraine had not simply failed to come. She had controlled what David was allowed to know. I borrowed Nora's tablet and opened my email. My hands shook so badly that I had to type with one finger. "Dad, I was in a serious car accident Tuesday. I had emergency surgery because my spleen ruptured. I have broken ribs, a fractured wrist, a concussion, and I needed blood transfusions. I am stable now. I need you to know that Mom was called the first night. More than once. Please call me when you can. I love you. Casey." I read it 4 times before sending it. Not because anything was wrong, because sending it felt like breaking a rule I had never agreed to. In my family, Lorraine controlled the temperature. You did not open a window without asking. I hit send. The reply did not come that night. It came at 6:17 the next morning, in the form of Nora's phone ringing on the tray table. She saw the international number and handed it to me without speaking. "Dad?" There was silence, then breathing, then, "Casey." His voice was wrong, too small. I had never heard my father sound small. "Dad, I'm okay." "No, you are alive. That is different." I closed my eyes. He asked me to tell him everything from the beginning. I did. Not the Instagram pictures, not yet. Just the medical facts. The collision, the internal bleeding, the surgery, the ICU, The transfusions. I heard him writing something down because David wrote when he was scared. Measurements calmed him. Then he said, "Your mother told me you were rear-ended." I opened my eyes. "What?" "She said the car was damaged, but you walked away. She said you were sore and embarrassed and didn't want me making a fuss." The monitor beside me kept making the same electronic pulse. I looked at it because looking at my own heart rate was easier than answering. "When did she tell you that?" "Wednesday morning. The morning after the surgeon told her I might die." He continued, each sentence quieter. "She said she had spoken to you. She said you were resting at home." I stopped breathing for a second. My mother had not merely minimized it. She had invented me. An imaginary version of me who had walked away from the crash, gone home, talked to her and decided Dad should stay at work. "Dad," I said carefully, "I woke up yesterday." The silence on the other end became enormous. "What do you mean?" "I was unconscious until yesterday." Another silence. Then I heard a chair scrape. He asked one question: "Did she come?" I could have protected him. I could have said she was busy. I could have repeated the family language I had been raised in. There was a lot going on. Madison needed support. Mom was overwhelmed. Instead I said, "No." He did not shout. That scared me more. My father was a man who swore at stripped screws and faulty compressors. When anger was small, it made noise. This anger did not. What did she do? I told him about the first call, then the surgeon, then Nora's third call. I repeated Lorraine's sentence exactly. "Your sister needs us more right now." The line stayed quiet long enough that I checked whether the call had dropped. Finally David said, "I'm coming home. Dad, finish the job." I said, "I'm coming home." "The company, Casey." I stopped. His voice steadied. "You almost died while I was 9,000 miles away because I believed your mother. I am not spending one more hour over here because she told me what was convenient." A few seconds later, he added something that changed the shape of the next week. "Don't tell her you reached me." "Why?" "I want to hear what she says when she doesn't know I already have the answer." That was my father. Not dramatic, not impulsive. An engineer faced with a failed system. First, verify the failure, then find out where the false reading entered. He booked the first flight he could get. I did not call Lorraine, neither did Nora. By day 5, I was walking slow laps around the hallway with a pillow pressed against my ribs. By day 6, the surgical team started talking about discharge. By day 7, my labs were good enough that home became the next stage of recovery. The problem was that my apartment was on the second floor. One staircase, 14 steps. I counted them from memory and knew immediately that my ribs would file a formal complaint. Nora had already decided the matter. "You're coming to my place. I can manage. You nearly fainted walking to the ice machine." "That was one time." "You also tried to change your own dressing." "I am literally qualified. You are literally impossible." So I went to Nora's, but before I left, I asked her for a piece of paper. Nothing fancy, hospital printer paper. Blue pen. I had spent a week listening to machines measure whether I was still alive, and in that time something in me had become tired of translating cruelty into kinder language. I wrote slowly because my wrist hurt. "Mom, I'm discharged. You don't need to come now. You had 7 days when it mattered. I know about the calls. I know where you were. Dad knows the truth too. He lands tonight. Please don't tell him I misunderstood. For once, tell him exactly what you chose. Casey." I folded the page once and placed it on the pillow. No speech, no confrontation, just a record. I knew records. They had saved my life. At 3:52 that afternoon, Nora drove me away from St. Bridget. At 4:31, Lorraine and Madison arrived. Nora learned the timing from one of the unit clerks, but what happened inside the room came from a nurse named Elena, who had worked with me for 4 years and possessed the rare gift of noticing everything while appearing to notice nothing. Lorraine came dressed for a photograph: cream slacks, soft blue blouse, pearl earrings, white lilies. Madison carried the balloon and a paper shopping bag from a bakery. They had brought lemon cupcakes. I hate lemon cake. Madison loves it. That detail almost made me laugh when Elena told me. My mother walked into the room first and stopped. She looked at the empty bed, then at the bathroom, then at the stripped IV pole. Madison said, "Where is she?" Elena pointed to the pillow. The note was still there. Lorraine picked it up. Elena said she read the first 2 lines quickly, then slower, then she went back to the beginning. By the time she reached "Dad knows the truth too," her hand had started shaking. Madison leaned over her shoulder. "What truth?" Lorraine folded the paper immediately. "Nothing." Alana told me that single word stayed with her. Nothing. Not, "Your sister is hurt." Not, "Your father is coming home." Not even, "We made a mistake." Nothing. Because that was Lorraine's first instinct whenever the truth threatened the picture. Shrink it, rename it, call it nothing. She asked Elena where I had gone. Elena told her privacy rules prevented her from discussing my discharge arrangements. My mother's voice sharpened. "I am her mother." Elena replied, "Then I'm sure she'll tell you when she's ready." I bought Elena coffee for a week after I returned to work. Lorraine called Nora 3 times that evening. Nora did not answer. She called me twice through the hospital's patient messaging system. I did not answer. For once, silence belonged to me. At 7:46, my father knocked on Nora's apartment door. He had a suitcase in one hand and his laptop bag over the other shoulder. He looked older than he had 3 weeks earlier. Not because of the flight, because innocence ages quickly when it breaks. I was sitting on Nora's couch under a gray blanket, with my wrist elevated on 2 pillows. David looked at the bruising along my jaw, the yellow-purple marks crossing my collarbone, the hospital bracelet I had forgotten to remove. He set both bags down, then he crossed the room and stopped in front of me like he was afraid touching me might hurt. "Can I hug you?" That nearly finished me. My own father asking permission to hold his daughter because everybody else had made my body into a problem to work around. I nodded. He bent carefully and put both arms around me. Not tight, not long, just enough. "How's my girl?" he whispered. I cried then. Not pretty tears, not cinematic tears. The kind that come from somewhere beneath language. All week I had been the nurse, the patient, the abandoned daughter, the person making discharge plans, the person saying okay because okay required less oxygen than grief. For 5 minutes I was simply David Rutledge's daughter. And he stayed. When I could breathe again, he sat beside me and asked for the timeline. So I gave it to him. Every call, every answer, every hour. The Instagram posts, the bridal boutique, biscuit, the invented conversation where Lorraine claimed I had told him to stay in Singapore. David listened without interruption. Then he asked to see Madison's pictures. I showed him. He stared at the image of Lorraine smiling behind Madison at 8:57, 14 minutes after the hospital called. His face did not change, but his thumb froze against the screen. Finally, he handed the phone back. She knew. Yes, and she lied to me after she knew. Yes, he leaned forward and put his elbows on his knees. For a while he studied the floorboards. Then he said, "There are mistakes you make because you panic." I waited. "And then there are decisions." He looked at me. This was a decision. That sentence mattered because it was the first time someone inside my family had named what Lorraine did without decorating it. No stress. No misunderstanding. No wedding pressure. A decision. Dad stood. "Where are you going?" "Home." My chest tightened. "Dad, don't do anything because of me." He looked almost offended. "Casey, this is not because of you." He picked up his keys. "It is because of what she did." Then he paused at the doorway. "One question. What? Has she always done this?" I opened my mouth, and for the first time, instead of defending my mother, I let 31 years answer, yes. David nodded once, not surprised, not yet angry, just hurt in a way I had never seen. Then he left to go ask his wife why one daughter had always been worth arriving for, and the other had been expected to understand. Dad told me about the confrontation the next afternoon. When he came back to Nora's apartment that night, it was after midnight. He looked like he had spent 5 hours inside a room where every object had changed its meaning. He sat in the chair across from me and said, "Your mother says she was protecting everyone." I waited. "She said the wedding has been stressful. She said Madison was having a crisis. She said she knew the doctors would save you because you work there and they know you." Dad did not laugh. "She also said you've always been independent." There it was. Independent. the family word for neglected; easygoing, the family word for overlooked; strong, the family word for the child nobody checked on. I said, "What did you ask her?" "The only thing that mattered. Why did you tell me Casey spoke to you when Casey was unconscious?" She cried. I could picture Lorraine crying with the careful softness she used when tears had an audience. She said she panicked, said if I knew how bad it was, I would abandon the Singapore project, lose the completion bonus, and maybe jeopardize my position. I asked her whether my job was worth missing my daughter's death. My throat tightened. What did she say? She said you didn't die. Dad looked toward Nora's kitchen. Then Madison came downstairs. She said Mom had been under impossible pressure, and I was making everything about the accident. Of course. She also said you're angry because the wedding gets attention. Dad's mouth pulled into something that was not a smile. I asked her whether she understood that you had an organ removed. What did she say? She said she knew. And? She asked whether I was still paying the florist balance Friday. Some family truths arrive as invoices showing exactly what everyone valued. Dad eventually stood. I'm sleeping in the guest room. You don't have to make decisions tonight. I'm not. He looked at me. But I am done pretending I don't see the problem. Hearing him say it made me tired. Confirmation brought relief, but also grief for every younger version of me who thought effort could change the result. Over the next 2 weeks, my body healed faster than my instincts. I stayed at Nora's apartment because I still could not comfortably climb the stairs to my own place. Every morning, she ordered me to rest. Every morning, I failed. I wiped counters one-handed, folded towels, reorganized her medicine cabinet, made grocery lists. Once I tried to vacuum and nearly reopened my incision. Nora came home, saw the vacuum cord, and stared at me. What? You are doing it again. Doing what? Earning your oxygen. She set her bag down and pointed at the couch. Sit. I'm bored. You're terrified. Nora took the chair opposite me. Nora took the chair opposite me. You think if you're useful enough, nobody can resent taking care of you? I looked away. That's not what I'm doing. It is exactly what you're doing. She reached for the basket of folded laundry beside me. You almost died, Casey. Your mother didn't come. Your sister complained about the timing. Your father crossed an ocean. I gave you a couch. None of those things are invoices. Stop paying for the couch. My eyes burned. That evening, after she went to bed, I opened the family photo archive on my laptop. My cousin had scanned decades of family photographs after Grandma died. I began with childhood. There was Madison at 6 wearing a paper crown while Lorraine held the cake. Madison at 9 on a horse, Lorraine standing beside the fence. Madison at 12 holding a dance trophy with both parents leaning into the frame. Then me. I appeared differently. At 7, I was behind the cake, carrying paper plates. At 11, I was kneeling beside Madison tying her shoe. At 14, I was half visible at the edge of a Christmas photo because I had set the camera timer and run into frame too late. Dad at my science fair. Dad beside me at high school graduation. Dad holding my hand at my nursing pinning ceremony while Lorraine checked her phone behind us. I remembered the argument from that morning. Madison had wanted Lorraine to drive with her to a sample sale 2 hours away. My pinning ceremony was at 10. The sale opened at noon. Lorraine had spent the entire ceremony calculating traffic. At lunch, she left before dessert. I had told everyone it was fine, the anesthesia of dependable daughters. I scrolled backward farther. Birthdays, school pictures, Easter dresses. And then I noticed something I had never thought about before. There were almost no photographs of Lorraine pregnant with Madison. Not strange by itself. It was 1990. But there were photographs from the year. Lorraine at a church picnic in July, wearing a loose floral dress. Lorraine at Labor Day, standing behind a folding table. Then a wedding photograph dated October. My parents had always told us they married quickly because Dad received a job offer in another city. Madison was born the following April. 5 weeks early. That part I knew because Lorraine used to tell the story every birthday. Couldn't wait to meet us. I closed the album. There was nothing suspicious there. Not really. A rushed wedding happened. Premature babies happened. Mothers favored daughters for reasons that had nothing to do with biology. 3 days later, Madison came to visit. She arrived carrying a scented candle and a box of macarons. Peace offering, she said. I looked at the label on the candle. It still had the promotional sticker from the cosmetics company she represented. Free gift with qualifying purchase. She sat on the arm of Nora's sofa rather than the chair, as if she did not intend to stay long enough to get comfortable. Her engagement ring caught the afternoon light. How are you feeling? Better. Good. She nodded too quickly. Then came the real reason. Are you still planning to be in the wedding? I looked at my wrist. The cast was gone, replaced with a removable brace. I think so. Her shoulders lowered. Oh, thank God. Because the seating chart would survive, she continued. I just didn't know if you were going to make some statement. What kind of statement? You know, not show up, make Dad weird, tell relatives things. What things? She looked annoyed. The hospital stuff. The hospital stuff. You know what I mean. I did. She wanted my near-death reduced to an awkward anecdote before the photographer arrived. Madison, Mom was told I might die. She told me they said you were stable. She was told that after surgery. Before surgery she was told to come immediately. Madison's face tightened. Okay, but Biscuit was screaming. I stared at her. A dog was screaming. Therefore our mother could not sit beside her dying daughter. Madison stood. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. You always do this. Do what? Make everything sound ugly. Something inside me became very still. I don't make it ugly by repeating it. Her eyes flashed. Mom has spent her whole life keeping this family together. I thought of my father in the guest room. Has she? Madison picked up her purse. I'm not doing this. Then don't. She reached the door, stopped, and turned back. For what it's worth, I was scared. Of losing me? Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. After she left, Nora emerged from her bedroom. You were listening? My apartment is the size of a shoebox. I leaned back carefully. She came to ask whether I'd behave at the wedding. She came to make sure the furniture was still arranged correctly. In Lorraine's house, people had positions. Dad provided. I repaired. Madison received. And Lorraine arranged us all so the picture looked balanced. A week later, Dad invited me to Sunday dinner. He had moved back into the master bedroom, but only because Lorraine complained relatives were asking why the guest room light stayed on late. He told me nothing had been resolved. He was waiting until after Madison's wedding to make any permanent decisions. Dad had spent 62 years believing patience was honorable. I went. Lorraine greeted me with a hug, careful enough to protect her blouse. She had cooked chicken and dumplings. My favorite, she announced. I had not eaten meat regularly in almost 10 years. Madison knew. Dad knew. Nora knew. My mother had somehow preserved a 12-year-old version of me in her mind, because updating the file required attention. Dinner was polite, painfully polite. Lorraine talked about wedding flowers, hotel rooms, and how beautiful it would look to have both daughters standing together. Dad barely spoke. He watched her, not angrily, clinically. As if he had spent decades operating a machine and only now noticed one gauge was disconnected. After dessert, he asked me to grab his reading glasses from the study. I went down the hall. The top desk drawer was open. On top of the rubber bands and old receipts sat the 2 donor cards I had seen before the accident. David Rutledge, O negative. Lorraine Rutledge, a positive. I picked up Dad's glasses. Then I saw a folded laboratory printout beside the cards. My name was on it, a negative. It was a copy of the transfusion record from my hospital stay. Dad must have printed it. 3 blood types, O negative, a positive, a negative. I was putting the paper back when a memory surfaced with such precision that I actually froze. Mercy West, 7 years earlier. Madison's emergency appendectomy. I had been 24, still a new nurse, sitting beside her while the preoperative nurse verified her bracelet. Name, date of birth, allergies, blood type, AB positive. Madison had laughed through her fear. Universal recipient. I can take from everybody. Very on brand. She repeated that joke for years. I stood in my father's study holding his glasses, while 4 letters rearranged my childhood. O, A, B. An O parent contributes O. An A parent can contribute A or O. Together, depending on genotype, they can produce A or O, but not AB. Not without a B. I sat down in Dad's desk chair, because suddenly my knees did not trust me. There had to be another explanation. A wrong memory, a mistaken card, a rare exception. I stayed in that chair and tried to reason like a nurse instead of a daughter. Blood types were clues, not verdicts. Charts could be wrong, memories could be wrong. Biology had uncommon exceptions, and I knew enough medicine to know certainty required more than 4 letters remembered from an old preoperative conversation. Still, the clue had opened a door I could not close. I thought about the way Lorraine touched Madison's hair whenever she was nervous, the way she defended her before anyone accused her, the way every sacrifice in our house seemed to travel in one direction. Then another memory surfaced. At Madison's 25th birthday, a man from Delaney Motors had sent roses to the restaurant. Lorraine had said he was a family friend. Madison had joked that he spoiled her more than Dad did. I had forgotten his name because there had been no reason to remember it. Frank Delaney. The name came back, carrying no proof. Wait. I put the transfusion paper down where I found it. Whatever this was, I would not turn suspicion into accusation, but I would stop pretending the question had never appeared. For once, I intended to follow where it led. Because if David was O negative and Lorraine was A positive, Madison could not be AB positive in the ordinary inheritance pattern. And for the first time since the crash, the question was no longer why my mother had chosen my sister over me. It was who, exactly, my mother had been choosing all these years. I did not sleep much that night. Nora noticed before I said anything. She came into the kitchen at 6 the next morning, found me sitting with cold coffee and a legal pad, and stopped in the doorway. What happened? I turned the pad around. 4 names: David, Lorraine, Casey, Madison. Beside each name, a blood type. Nora read them once and sat down. You're sure about Madison? I'm sure I remember it. That isn't the same thing. I know, that was why I loved her. She did not leap toward the most dramatic answer. She pulled me back toward what could actually be supported. I told her about the donor cards, my transfusion record, Mercy West, the joke Madison had made about being a universal recipient, and the name that had surfaced in my memory. Frank Delaney. Nora tapped her finger beside his name. Who is he? A car dealer. Or he was. Family friend, apparently. You think he's Madison's father? I think I have a question. Good. Keep it a question until you have an answer. That became my rule. I was not going to secretly dig through medical records. I was not going to steal DNA. I was not going to turn my mother's life into a crime board because I was angry. I would use what belonged to me, my memories, public records, conversations people chose to have. And I would stop the moment the truth became clear enough that pretending otherwise would require effort. The first person I called was Aunt Carol, Dad's older sister. Carol had spent 35 years collecting family history without advertising that she was doing it. Every family has someone like that. The person who knows who stopped speaking to whom after Thanksgiving in 1988, which cousin borrowed money and never returned it, and why Grandma refused to sit beside a certain woman at church. I asked if I could visit. There was a pause. Then she said, "You finally saw something, didn't you?" I drove to her house the following afternoon. Carol lived 20 minutes outside town in a brick ranch with wind chimes on the porch and enough framed photographs inside to document 3 generations of mistakes. She poured coffee, set a plate of shortbread between us, and waited. I started carefully. Do you know someone named Frank Delaney? Carol did not ask which Frank. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, she looked older. What has Lorraine told you? Nothing. Has David? No. She studied my face. Then why are you asking? I could have mentioned the blood types. Instead I said, because I'm trying to understand why Mom has always treated Madison like losing her would kill her, and treated me like losing me would be inconvenient. Carol's expression broke. She reached for her coffee and did not drink it. Your father loved your mother before she ever noticed him, she said. High school, college, after. David was patient in a way that sometimes looked like hope. And Frank? Frank didn't wait. The story came slowly. Lorraine was 23 and working at her father's hardware store when she started seeing Frank Delaney. He was handsome, ambitious, charming, and already connected to the family dealership business that would eventually make his name recognizable across 3 counties. According to Carol, everyone assumed Lorraine and Frank would marry. Then Frank became engaged to another woman, because the other woman's father owned 2 dealerships, and Frank understood opportunity. He chose the business, Carol said. What did Mom do? What girls were told to do then. She survived quietly. 2 months later, Lorraine accepted a proposal from David. The wedding happened fast. Madison was born the following April, 5 weeks early. That part I knew because Lorraine used to tell the story every birthday. Couldn't wait to meet us. I closed the album. There was nothing suspicious there. Not really. A rushed wedding happened, premature babies happened, mothers favored daughters for reasons that had nothing to do with biology. 3 days later, Madison came to visit. She arrived carrying a scented candle and a box of macarons. Peace offering, she said. I looked at the label on the candle. It still had the promotional sticker from the cosmetics company she represented. Free gift with qualifying purchase. She sat on the arm of Nora's sofa rather than the chair, as if she did not intend to stay long enough to get comfortable. Her engagement ring caught the afternoon light. How are you feeling? Better. Good. She nodded too quickly. Then came the real reason. Are you still planning to be in the wedding? I looked at my wrist. The cast was gone, replaced with a removable brace. I think so. Her shoulders lowered. Oh, thank God. Because the seating chart would survive. She continued. I just didn't know if you were going to make some statement. What kind of statement? You know, not show up, make Dad weird, tell relatives things. What things? She looked annoyed. The hospital stuff. The hospital stuff. You know what I mean. I did. She wanted my near-death reduced to an awkward anecdote before the photographer arrived. Madison, Mom was told I might die. She told me they said you were stable. She was told that after surgery. Before surgery she was told to come immediately. Madison's face tightened. Okay, but Biscuit was screaming. I stared at her. A dog was screaming. Therefore our mother could not sit beside her dying daughter. Madison stood. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. You always do this. Do what? Make everything sound ugly. Something inside me became very still. I don't make it ugly by repeating it. Her eyes flashed. Mom has spent her whole life keeping this family together. I thought of my father in the guest room. Has she? Madison picked up the candle. You're angry because people care about my wedding. No. Then what do you want? The question was sincere. That was the sad part. She genuinely could not imagine I wanted anything other than some share of her attention. I wanted my mother to come when a surgeon told her I could die. Madison looked toward the door. You survived. There it was again, the outcome being used to erase the choice. I nodded. Yes, I did. She left 5 minutes later. Nora came out of the kitchen after the door closed. You okay? I think so. You don't sound okay. I keep waiting for Madison to understand. Nora sat beside me. Maybe stop making your healing dependent on someone else developing a skill they have never practiced. That sentence stayed with me. A week later, Dad invited me to Sunday dinner. Lorraine greeted me with a hug, careful enough to protect her blouse. She had cooked chicken and dumplings. My favorite, she announced. I had not eaten meat regularly in almost 10 years. Dinner was polite. Painfully polite. Lorraine talked about wedding flowers, hotel rooms, and how beautiful it would look to have both daughters standing together. Dad barely spoke. After dessert, he asked me to grab his reading glasses from the study. The top desk drawer was open. On top sat the 2 donor cards. David Rutledge. O negative. Lorraine Rutledge. A positive. Beside them was a copy of my transfusion record, a negative. Then the memory returned. Mercy West. Madison's appendectomy. The nurse verifying her blood type. AB positive. Madison laughing. Universal recipient. I can take from everybody. Very on brand. 4 letters rearranged my childhood. O. A. A. AB. There had to be another explanation. A wrong memory. A mistaken card. A rare exception. I sat down because my knees felt unreliable. Blood types were clues, not verdicts. Charts could be wrong. Memories could be wrong. Biology had uncommon exceptions, and certainty required more than 4 remembered letters. Still, the question had opened a door. I thought about Lorraine protecting Madison before anybody accused her. Then another memory surfaced. At Madison's 25th birthday, a man from Delaney Motors had sent roses to the restaurant. Lorraine called him a family friend, Frank Delaney. I put the paper back. Whatever this was, I would not turn suspicion into accusation, but I would follow the question. The first person I called was Aunt Carol. Carol lived 20 minutes outside town and knew every family story people preferred not to remember. When I asked whether she knew Frank Delaney, she closed her eyes. Then she told me, Lorraine had been in love with Frank before Dad. Everyone expected them to marry. Frank married another woman whose father owned dealerships. 2 months later, Lorraine accepted Dad's proposal. Madison arrived the following spring, officially 5 weeks premature. How big was she? Carol looked uncomfortable. 9 pounds and 2 ounces. Neff, she brought out an old shoebox. Inside was a photograph dated June 1990. Lorraine stood beside a red convertible. Frank leaned against the driver's door. He was not looking at the camera. He was looking at her. On the back, in my grandmother Ruth's handwriting, were 4 words. Lorraine plus Frank. God help us. There's more, Carol said. Frank's wife died in 2006. He returned to town the following year. About 15 years ago, Carol saw Lorraine sitting in Frank's car near Mercer Lake. He touched her face. Did you tell Dad? No. Why? I told myself I didn't know what I had seen. For 15 years? Yes. She did not defend herself. I'm sorry, Casey. Then I remembered Thursdays. Lorraine's book club. Every Thursday evening, 7 to 10, same perfume, same Lexus. Same vague answer whenever anyone asked what they were reading. I had never seen a book. The following Thursday, Nora drove. We almost turned around twice. At 7:42, Lorraine's Lexus passed us heading east toward Mercer Lake. We followed at a distance. She turned into Harbor Pines condominiums. Nora kept driving, circled the block, and came back. Lorraine's Lexus was parked beneath a security light. Third space from the entrance. Delaney Motors license frame, parish parking sticker, my mother's car. I did not need to climb stairs. I did not need to look through windows. The book club had never needed books. I stared at the Lexus. What broke something in me was not merely the possibility of an affair. It was the architecture around it, the hurried marriage, the premature baby, the favoritism, the lie about my accident. Madison might not simply have been Lorraine's favorite. She might have been connected to the life Lorraine believed she should have had, and I had been the daughter of the marriage she settled for. Drive, I said. 3 days later, Lorraine texted. Sunday dinner, just us girls. I miss you. I went. Madison was absent. Lorraine talked wedding logistics for 20 minutes, then poured tea. I heard you visited Carol. I did. She romanticizes old stories. I asked for coffee. My mother's spoon stopped. What did you ask her? Why? Her eyes lifted. It was the first time I had ever watched Lorraine become uncertain around me. 2 days later, she arrived at Nora's apartment, carrying a white envelope. Inside was a check for $20,000. For a new car. Insurance had replaced mine. For medical expenses. Most had been covered. Then came the real purchase. This family has had enough stress. Old stories, misunderstandings, things people think they remember from decades ago. None of that should ruin Madison's wedding or hurt your father. Nobody had mentioned Frank. Nobody had mentioned Mercer Lake. Nobody had mentioned blood. Yet Lorraine was offering $20,000 and asking me to protect Dad from old stories. I slid the check back. I don't want your money. Don't be childish. This isn't help. Of course it is. Help comes before someone asks for silence. Her face changed. You need to think carefully about what you're doing. I am. Your father is happy. Is he informed? Her eyes went cold. If you destroy this family, Casey, do not expect everyone to thank you for telling the truth. I looked at the envelope. For 31 years, I thought being loved here meant being useful, quiet, and easy to disappoint. She said nothing. I'm done paying for my place in this family. Lorraine picked up the check. At the door she turned. You have always been dramatic when you feel overlooked. I had nearly died without making a scene. No, Mom. I met her eyes. I think I've been quiet enough. She left. Nora came in carrying 2 mugs. What now? I thought of Dad paying wedding bills. 35 years of marriage, 15 years of Thursdays. Then I said, now I decide whether Dad deserves the truth more than he deserves the comfort of the lie. For 3 days, I told myself silence could still be kindness. Dad was 62, an engineer who trusted measurements and people who looked him in the eye. For 35 years he had built a house, raised daughters, paid bills, buried parents, and believed his marriage was real. What right did I have to hand him one sentence that could counterfeit all of it? Then I remembered the hospital. Lorraine had made the same argument for me. She had decided Dad could not handle the truth. She had called it protection. The result was an empty chair beside my bed. That was when I understood something I should have learned much earlier. Silence is not automatically mercy. Sometimes it is control, wearing a softer dress. Nora found me at the kitchen table with my notebook open and nothing written on the page. "You're trying to find a painless way to do a painful thing," she said. "I'm trying not to destroy him." "You don't have that power. You didn't create this," Nora said. "Whatever happens after the truth belongs to the choices that came before it." He paid the rest of Madison's venue bill yesterday, and he made a deposit at St. Monica's. For what? A vow renewal. 35th anniversary, same church, same altar. Dad had told me in the truck that morning, with the shy pride he used whenever he planned something generous. "Your mother never got the wedding she deserved," he said. He explained that he wanted the same church and altar for their anniversary, a surprise after Madison's honeymoon. Apparently not. I'm old, Casey. My father was taking money from his retirement to renew vows that may never have been true. I realized then that every day I waited, the lie kept charging interest. So I chose Saturday. Dad and I had fished Mercer Lake since I was 9. It was the one place where silence never felt like punishment. He picked me up before sunrise. 2 travel mugs in the cup holders. Bait in a red cooler. The same faded cap he had worn for 15 years. Neither of us mentioned Lorraine. At the lake, mist hovered above the water, and the dock boards were wet enough to make Dad complain about liability. He unfolded 2 chairs. We cast, nothing bit. For 40 minutes, we talked about ordinary things. My physical therapy, his work, whether Nora's ancient dishwasher was worth repairing. Then he told the story about the bass I caught when I was 9, and released because I was convinced it had children waiting for it. "You cried harder for that fish than you did when you broke your arm." I was compassionate. "You apologized to it. It had been through enough." He laughed. I wanted to freeze the sound. Then Dad stopped. He reeled in slowly and rested the rod across his knees. "You've been carrying something." I stared at the water. "What makes you say that?" "You count exits when you're nervous." I looked behind me. The parking lot, the trail, the road. 3 exits. He noticed everything when he remembered to look. "Casey," his voice was gentle. "Whatever it is, I would rather know than watch it bend you. There are moments when somebody unknowingly gives you permission to change their life." I set my rod down. "I need to tell you something about Mom." His jaw tightened. "This is about the hospital?" It started there. I began with what he already knew, because I wanted the ground beneath him to stay recognizable as long as possible. I told him Lorraine's lie had made me question whether the way she treated me was part of something larger. Then I told him about the donor cards. "O negative for you. A positive for Mom." He nodded. "My blood type is A negative." Another nod. "Madison is AB positive." Dad looked at me. I watched the engineer arrive before the husband understood why. His eyes narrowed slightly. "O and A, yes." He stared at the water. "O gives O, yes. A gives A or O, usually." He looked back at me. "Where does the B come from?" My throat closed. "It doesn't." His face did not move. So I continued. I explained that blood types were a clue, not proof of a specific father. I had used no private records. I only knew what I remembered from Madison's surgery and what the donor cards showed. Then I told him about Carol. Frank Delaney, 1990. The rushed engagement, the 9-pound premature baby. Dad flinched at that. I hated Carol for 1 second for giving me that detail. Then I hated myself for wanting one less fact. I told him Frank returned after his wife died. I told him about Thursday Book Club. I told him Lorraine's Lexus had been parked at Harbor Pines. I told him about the $20,000 check. I told him she had asked me to protect him before I ever accused her of anything. When I finished, the lake looked exactly the same. That offended me. Water moved. A bird landed near the reeds. Somebody started an engine in the parking lot. The world had no manners. Dad sat motionless. Finally he said, "How long have you known?" "About the blood types." "A few weeks. And the rest?" "Piece by piece." He nodded. Then came the first defense. "Your mother would never do something like that." He said it without conviction. I did not challenge him. A minute passed. Then he whispered, "She lied about your accident." That was the crack. Once a person has watched one impossible thing become true, the second impossible thing has less distance to travel. Dad took off his cap and rubbed both hands over his face. "Frank Delaney." "Yes. I bought 3 cars from him." I had not known that. Dad laughed once. It was a terrible sound. He shook my hand at Madison's graduation. I wanted to reach for him. I did not. He needed room to feel whatever arrived. "Does Madison know?" "I don't think so." "Does Lorraine know you told me?" "No." "Good." His voice changed. "What else?" "That's everything I can support." He looked at me sharply. "Support? I'm not asking you to trust my conclusion. I'm giving you what I know so you can verify it yourself." He stared at me for a long time. "You thought about not telling me?" "Yes." "Why?" "The wedding, your health, your marriage. I thought maybe being happy inside a lie was better than knowing." "And what changed?" "The vow renewal." His eyes closed. I continued, because stopping would turn cruelty into suspense. "You were about to spend retirement money renewing vows, while Mom was still meeting Frank. Staying silent would be helping her make choices for you." Dad's eyes filled. He looked down fast, embarrassed by tears even with his own daughter. I put my hand over his. "Ask me anything." He did. For the next hour he questioned the timeline like an engineer. Dates, locations, what Carol witnessed, what she only heard, Madison's type, and whether I had photographed Lorraine's car. Because I didn't want to become someone collecting evidence against my mother. I only needed to know whether I was imagining the pattern. "And were you?" "No." He nodded. Then he cried. My father did not collapse. He did not shout. His shoulders shook twice. He stared across Mercer Lake as if the opposite shore might contain instructions. "I was good to her," he said. It was not a question. Yes. I worked too much. Yes. I missed things. Yes. I was still good to her. Yes, Dad. He swallowed. Was I stupid? No. He turned toward me. How is believing your wife not stupid? Trust is not stupidity. Lying to someone who trusts you is the failure. That sentence seemed to give him somewhere to put the shame. He breathed slowly. Then he asked the question I had feared most. "If Madison isn't mine, what does that make her?" I answered immediately. "Your daughter." His face changed. I continued. "You raised her. You taught her to drive. You loved her for 35 years. Biology can identify DNA. It cannot erase fatherhood." He looked down at his hands. After a while he said, "I will walk her down the aisle." I had expected anger. That was when I remembered who David was. He did not punish children for adults' decisions. "The wedding stays exactly as planned," he said. "Madison gets her day." "And Mom?" His expression became quiet. "I will ask Lorraine one question tonight." "What question?" "Tell me about Thursdays." I almost smiled. No accusation. No names. Just a door. If Lorraine told the truth, there might still be some dignity left. If she lied, she would choose the rest herself. Dad picked up his rod. For several minutes we watched the line float. Then he said, "Monday after the wedding, I'm calling a lawyer." My chest tightened. "Dad, you don't have to decide today." "I'm not deciding today." He looked at me. "I decided the night she told me you were home resting while you were unconscious." That surprised me. The rest only tells me how long I ignored what kind of marriage I was in. Then his voice softened. "And Casey? Yes? You were never difficult to love." I looked away. He reached over and touched the back of my hand. "You were the easy part. You were always the easy part." I had waited 31 years to hear that from someone inside my family. By then, strangely, I no longer needed it to survive. But I was still grateful to hear it. That night, Dad went home. He told me what happened 2 days later. Lorraine was in the kitchen arranging escort cards for the reception. Dad set his keys down. "Tell me about Thursdays." She looked up. "What about them? Where do you go?" "Book club." What book are you reading? She smiled. Dad said the smile was what convinced him. Not because it was guilty, because it was automatic. It was the smile she used whenever charm replaced an answer. I don't remember the title. You've been attending for 20 years. We read lots of books, David. Name one. Her face hardened. What is this? A question. Then she started moving through the familiar stations. Offense. You're interrogating me now? Injury. After everything I've done for this family? Counterattack. Casey has been poisoning you since the hospital. Dad said he felt something settle in him when she used my name. He had not mentioned me. He asked again. Where do you go on Thursdays? Lorraine stood. Fine. You want drama? I'll call Frank. Dad had not said Frank either. That was the second answer. She dialed. Put the phone on speaker. Frank answered with 2 words. Hey, beautiful. Lorraine went white. Dad said nothing. Frank continued. You coming over tomorrow instead? Lorraine grabbed the phone. Frank, David is here. Silence. Then Frank changed completely. Why are you calling me? Tell him. Tell him what? About us. Another silence. Dad said Frank sounded irritated. Not ashamed, inconvenienced. Lorraine, don't involve me in your marriage. You said. I said a lot of things. What about Madison? Dad told me that was the moment the room stopped. Lorraine had said her name before anyone else did. Frank exhaled. Then he said, I'm not doing this. The call ended. My father finally understood that the person who destroys the picture is not always the one who tells the truth. Sometimes it is the one who arranged everyone around a lie. He moved into the guest room. The wedding was 8 days away. And nobody outside 4 people knew that when David Rutledge walked Madison down the aisle, he would be giving away a daughter he had just learned was never biologically his, while standing beside a wife who had finally run out of places to hide. The wedding happened exactly as scheduled. That was Dad's decision, and once he made it, he protected Madison's day with the same discipline he had used to protect every project he ever managed. Nobody at the venue knew what had happened in our kitchen. Nobody knew why Lorraine's smile looked almost painfully perfect. Nobody knew why Dad stood so straight beside Madison before the ceremony, one hand resting over hers as if he were memorizing the shape of a life he refused to let biology repossess. I stood 3 rows back, not beside Lorraine, not beside Madison, not performing, just present. When the music started, Madison appeared at the end of the aisle in ivory lace, her eyes already wet. Dad looked at her, and for 1 second I saw 35 years move across his face at once. Scraped knees, school pictures, driving lessons, graduations, every midnight phone call, every bill, every ordinary Tuesday when he had been her father without needing proof. He offered his arm. She took it. And he walked her forward. That was the moment I understood something Lorraine never had. Truth does not erase what was real. It only removes what was false. Dad's love for Madison was real. His marriage was not what he had believed. Those 2 facts could exist together. At the reception, Lorraine avoided my eyes until dessert. Then she approached while everyone else was watching Madison cut the cake. You're satisfied? She whispered. I looked at her. With what? This. She gestured toward Dad, standing alone near the windows. You wanted him to know. Now look at him. There had been a time when that accusation would have worked. I would have swallowed guilt just to make her comfortable. Instead I said, he looks like a man who finally gets to make decisions with the truth. Her jaw tightened. You think you saved him? No. I looked toward Dad. I think he saved me first. Monday morning, Dad met with a lawyer. There was no dramatic public confrontation after that, no smashed plates, no speech delivered to the church, no family group chat explosion. There were documents, bank statements, appointments, a quiet separation. Then a divorce. The house sold 6 months later. Lorraine moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on 5th Street. Frank sold his dealership the following winter and moved to Florida with someone else. I heard that through Carol, who delivered the information without satisfaction. Some consequences do not need applause. Madison learned the truth from Dad after her honeymoon. She called me immediately. You knew before my wedding? Yes. And you didn't tell me? I thought Dad should decide how and when. You let me walk down that aisle not knowing. I let your father walk you down the aisle because he wanted to. Silence. Then anger. You think you're better than Mom? No. That was finally true. I just don't want to live like her. Madison hung up. We did not speak for 4 months. During that time, I moved back into my apartment. I returned to work, but not to 12-hour inpatient shifts. I took a position at an outpatient clinic, where emergencies were rare, nights belonged to me, and nobody expected me to prove my worth by being exhausted. Nora called it progress. Dad called it overdue. I called it strange. Rest felt suspicious at first. So did saying no. Then, slowly, both began to feel normal. Dad bought a small blue house near Mercer Lake after the divorce. Sunday mornings became pancakes. He cooked. I sat at the counter. The first few weeks, I kept reaching for dishes, coffee, anything useful. Each time, Dad pointed the spatula at me. Sit down, Casey. I'm helping. No, you're visiting. There is a difference. In the spring, Madison texted me. 2 lines. I did the DNA test. Dad is still Dad. I stared at the message for a long time, then another appeared. I'm sorry I didn't come to the hospital. Not Mom told me it was fine. Not Biscuit was hurt. Not the wedding was stressful. Just the sentence. I'm sorry I didn't come. I cried harder over that than I expected. I typed several versions of forgiveness and deleted all of them. Finally I sent, when you're ready to talk, I'll show up. Almost a year after the crash, I went back to St. Bridget for a small surgical repair near my scar. Routine, 1-day procedure, nothing frightening. Still, paperwork is paperwork. Name, insurance, medication list, emergency contact. For 13 years, that line had said, Lorraine Rutledge, Mother. I held the pen above the page. Then I printed carefully. David Rutledge, Father. When I woke in recovery, my mouth was dry, and the lights were too bright. A monitor counted my heartbeat. For one terrible second, memory returned before reason. The crash, the empty doorway, the 3 calls. Then I turned my head. Dad was asleep in the visitor chair with a fishing magazine folded across his chest. Beside him sat gas station daisies, still wearing the price sticker. Nobody had told him I might die. Nobody had begged him to come. There was no emergency. He came anyway. I lay there listening to the monitor and finally understood what 31 years of trying had kept me from seeing. Blood can tell you where you came from. It cannot tell you who will stay. Family is not the person who demands your loyalty while rationing theirs. Family is the person who shows up before you have anything useful to offer. My mother taught me that absence has a language. My father taught me presence does too. And the note I left on that hospital pillow was not the end of my family. It was the first thing I ever wrote that told the truth about my place in it. I had spent my whole life asking to be chosen. After that year, I stopped asking. The people who loved me had already answered by showing up.